Good evening, everyone. My name is Kate Lohr, and it is my good fortune to be the social justice minister here at this church. And in this church, we try to grow spiritually and together build beloved community. So you being here tonight helps us do that. We're so glad you're all here. I want to give you just a bit of information. I should say that this really started last January when Michelle Alexander came to Portland to talk about the new Jim Crow. It was an amazing event. It unleashed a lot of energy, and I want you to be part of it because this is a really critical time, and we want you to be well informed and inspired to be part of the solution. So we have a very esteemed panel. I'm so delighted that they all came here, and we have a great moderator too. Let me tell you just a little bit about them. Well, first, our state representative, Lou Frederick, represents the people of North and Northeast Portland, a district he calls rich in diversity and ambition. He serves on the Ways and Means Committee, the Ways and Means Subcommittee of Education, and is vice chair of the House Land Use Committee. Thank you. What?
That was just changed, and I'm surprised you got that. I'm actually now the vice chair of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lou, for agreeing to moderate tonight. And our panelists, I'd like to introduce them to you. First, there's Shannon Wight, who is the Deputy Director of Partnership for Safety and Justice, who is co-partnering with us on this event tonight. She's a former investigator and mitigation specialist for public defenders in Portland and in New Orleans. Shannon is also a co-founder of the Juvenile Justice Project of Louisiana and a former policy director for Innocence Project New Orleans. Welcome, Shannon. Next is JoAnn A Hardesty, formerly JoAnn Bowman. JoAnn was a state representative from 1995 to 2001 for District 19. Two of her many duties at that time was serving on the Judiciary Committee and the Criminal Law Subcommittee. JoAnn is also co-founder and organizer of the Portland Campaign to End the New Jim Crow. She is a former executive director of Oregon Action and is the host of KBOO community radio program Voices from the Edge. She's a well-known and highly regarded community activist, and she's also my friend. Welcome, JoAnn. And you heard mention of KBOO. KBOO is recording. We love KBOO and are thrilled that KBOO will be sharing parts of this evening with their listeners. Next, we have Carissa Rutledge, who's an attorney with Metropolitan Public Defenders, and her work includes the Expungement Clinic. She represents defendants in the START drug court and in civil commitment proceedings. Cassie is also the former director of a not-for-profit housing organization whose clients include people re-entering society from prison. She's a former board member for domestic violence and sexual assault resource centers. Welcome all of our, oops, and we saved best for last. Really, I mean, this is an amazing person. This is Emmanuel Price, Executive Director of SCAPE, which is Second Chances Are for Everyone. He has dedicated his time and energy to help reduce recidivism one person at a time. He will share his personal challenges in overcoming barriers, providing examples of how he has been able to help others who have had similar experiences. Will you please give our panelists and moderator a warm welcome. This is going to be fun. I'm really thrilled. Before we get started, I just want to give you a sense of what we're going to do this evening. We're going to start with each of the panelists will have like 6 minutes timed to sort of give a lay of the land, like what's going on in their little segment of this work, and why is this a particularly significant time to be addressing this issue. And then our moderator gets to ask the very first question of the panelists. But what you should be doing through to their presentation is writing down any question you might have. So when you are invited to do some question and answering, you have that question, one question, in your mind so that we use our time well. I will remind you that this won't be a time for you to give a panelist-like presentation. It will be time to raise a question, and we all appreciate that. Once that's done, which will be at 8 o'clock, you're going to have a chance to be with these wonderful panelists. Lou and I are going to float, but each of those panelists will be open to you. You get to pick somebody with whom you want to have more conversation. And at that point, we'll be leaving this space and going into a room where we'll have circles of folks, and you'll get to have some time to see not only our panelists, but to meet other people who share your particular interests. At that time, we're going to hope that one person for each circle will just jot down notes so that at the end that we can share it. Lou and I will give closing reflections, and we'll be out of here at 9 o'clock. So let us start now with asking for the opening statements. Shannon, would you like to start?
Thank you. So apparently I have a really short straw, and I get to go first. Closer to the mic. And so what I really want to talk about is why there is hope and movement, as we were introduced to, in Oregon right now to change and move us away from the new Jim Crow. But while I assume most people are here because they are aware of this issue, I do want to make sure that we all start from the same understanding and give a little bit of background to the work that we're talking about tonight. And I want to start out by saying, Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, has galvanized people around the country to start thinking about this issue in really critical ways. But one thing about her book, the title, The New Jim Crow, is to remember it's not new right now. What she's talking about is that mass incarceration replaced the Jim Crow laws that were abolished in the 1960s ultimately, right? So this mass incarceration movement has been with us for a really long time, and it's going to take a really long time and a lot of hard work to dismantle it. So this is not new, but it is a helpful frame, but just to remind us that we are started down a hopeful path, but we have a long and hard ways to go. And in Oregon, just to remind folks, so in 1980, we had about 3,000 people in prison in Oregon. Today, we have 14,000 people in prison in Oregon alone. In the United States, there are 2.2 million people in prison or in jails, and nearly 7 million people in the United States under some form of correctional control. So prison, jail, probation, parole. That is 1 in 100 people in the country in prisons or jails, 1 in 31 under some sort of correctional control. That number is 1 in 33 even here in Oregon. So I want us to start from that point because we're at both a real hopeful moment and at a real crisis in the number of people that we are incarcerating and how that is destroying communities. Resources are going to the wrong places, families are being split up. And as we know, it's disproportionately impacting people of color, particularly African Americans. So, but the hopeful part is that in the last few years, we've actually seen a leveling off, and in some states, a decline in the number of people going to prison. And this didn't just happen miraculously. People have been working for decades, some of the people at this table, to change the trajectory of the number of people that were going to prison. And finally, I think it has started to take hold, in part, as I'm sure many of you have heard, because of a kind of a cost analysis. We can't sort of buy our way out of crime, and it's destroying state budgets. But nonetheless, things have started happening, right? So we've seen Eric Holder say that we need to change mandatory sentencing for drug laws. That's a really big deal. The Pew Charitable Trust now has a whole arm that focuses on controlling corrections costs through sentencing reform. Those are sort of big mainstream organizations and people, and they're doing it because so many of us, and I'm sure so many of you, have been pushing for this change for so long. In Oregon, we had local momentum as well. Governor Kulongoski kicked off the need for reforms before he left. Governor Kitzhaber picked that up. And then, well, by some standards, we were lucky enough to have the Pew Public Safety Performance Project come here in 2013 to help us navigate through major public safety reform. And that happened, and as JoAnn was saying to me earlier, there were some things that certainly didn't happen for those of us who really work on criminal justice reform in Oregon. Measure 11 is the thing that is on the forefront of our minds, and we did not get that in this session. But what we did get is really significant. We are on track. If we stay on track, we will flatline prison growth for the next 5 years in Oregon. That means it's actually going to dip, our prison population will dip down, and the savings that we're expected to generate during that time is, over the next 5 years, is $300 million. This is it's significant. I mean, this legislative session, had that bill not passed, we would have started to build Oregon's 15th prison in Junction City. So this is really an incredible opportunity to break off our love affair with prison building and sending people to prison. And so I want to explain a little bit about what that bill did without getting into the weeds or going way over time. The bill, through some sentencing reforms, flatlined prison growth, created these savings, and now over the next 2 years, there's $15 million that each county gets a portion of to reinvest into local solutions, right? So addiction treatment, mental health treatment, reentry services. And the critical thing for all of us right now, and for us to be paying attention to, is every county's got to get it right. If we're going to flatline prison growth over the next 5 years, we have to get those calculations right. And so we, at my organization, Partnership for Safety and Justice, are watching how those counties are making those allocations and figuring out how we're going to hold people accountable to make sure they do it right. Because this is kind of, you know, a once-in-50-year opportunity to set us on a different path. Wow, did I talk way too long? And I'm going to have to skip a lot of what I wanted to say. I guess I'm going to say two things. One, another piece of legislation that passed this session that I think is important to note was spearheaded by Representative Senator Chip Shields, which creates racial impact statements for new crime bills. So it's a way to really analyze whether or not crimes are having a disproportionate impact on communities of color. We don't know exactly what that bill will do practically, but what I know, and I'm sure all these folks who worked out the legislature know, is that a conversation about race in the criminal justice system is long overdue, and I think that that piece of legislation is going to help us. So finally, I think we are on the right path, and I'm getting the 15-second line, and we just need to be, as I started out by saying, it took a long time to get here, it's going to take a long time to move back from it, and we need to be vigilant in our effort, make sure Oregon gets it right, and be on the lookout for the next incarnation of Jim Crow. Thank you.
I know none of us want the bell. Well, it's a bell though. It tells you you've been really, really bad.
It's a chime.
It's a chime.
It sounds nice.
Good evening. My name is JoAnn A Hardesty, and I'm involved with several groups that have been looking at the new Jim Crow. And I'm going to talk about each of them in my allotted time. I'm going to start with the group that I have the longest history with, which is the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. The group first came together over 10 years ago after the death of Kendra James at the hands of Portland Police. She was a 24-year-old African-American woman in an automobile, in the backseat of an automobile, jumped over the top of the automobile to try to drive away when the police made a traffic stop. The 250-pound officer decided he had no other option but to pull his gun and shoot and kill her. This year has been an anniversary for a lot of community members who have shared the experience that Kendra James' mom experienced. In fact, it's been 3 years since Keep Notice was killed by Portland police because he was driving a car that was his mom's car. And the gang enforcement officers who stopped him said, he looks like he could be a gang member. And so, I don't know if you have been stopped by gang enforcement officers, but if you are, it's 8 to 10 officers invited here that pull you over and are extremely intimidating. And so, at the end of the day, Keaton Otis was dead because he wore a hoodie and he looked like he might be a gang member. I want to take a moment and take about 30 seconds of silence because Fred Bryan is a casualty of Keaton Otis' death. Fred Bryan was the father of Keaton Otis, and last Tuesday he died after suffering a stroke because for the last 3 years, every single one, he's had a vigil at the location where his son was killed. So if we could take 30 seconds, I'll come back and finish my presentation. Thank you so much for that respectful silence. So the impact on community members when police officers act in a way that is inappropriate, that's aggressive, that is damaging to community members, the impact is just not to the young person or person who was stopped. The impact is felt by the entire community because the ripple effect of having a police force that you don't trust, a police force that comes out and brutalizes you rather than providing help is what many people in our community experience. And so the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform came together again after the death of Aaron Campbell, who you may remember was shot in the back by a sniper while he was in talks with a negotiator after him just being devastated because his younger brother had died earlier that day from liver failure. So I'm telling you stories, and these are stories of real people, real lives, real deaths that have taken place in our community. And if you listen to the public record of these deaths, what you hear is that the police did nothing wrong and everything was fine. But I'm here to question, to challenge you. We have, what they tell me is a very well-trained police force, and so if they're so well-trained, why do so many community members who are unarmed end up dead? I'm concerned because the Department of Justice, the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, invited the Department of Justice to come to town. This seems like it's been forever ago now, but it was right after Aaron Campbell's death. We sent a letter to the Department of Justice saying we would like you to come to town and investigate and tell us whether or not Portland police officers are treating African Americans differently than they're treating other people in the community. Well, the Department of Justice did come to town and did a 14-month investigation, but when they came to town, they did a bait and switch. They didn't investigate whether or not African American civil rights were being violated. Instead, they decided to investigate whether or not people with mental health issues or perceived to have mental health issues, civil rights had been violated. Well, guess what? Their civil rights had been violated. But you wouldn't know it if you only read the headlines. I would encourage you to go to the Department of Justice website and read the investigation of Portland Police. If you'd read the 53-page report like I had, what you would know, gee, that time goes fast. I'm already at a minute. Gee, pressure. I'm not used to speaking in 6-minute allotments. So anyway, the Department of Justice report is on their website. Tomorrow there will be a press conference where the City of Portland, the DOJ, and the Portland Police Association will join hands and say they've reached agreement on the settlement agreement. But I want you to know that there is no agreement until a fairness hearing happens, which the judge, Michael Simon, will schedule so that the public will for the first time be able to weigh in on this agreement. And so I'd like to tell you about the Portland campaign to end the new Jim Crow, but I'm out of time, so I'm sure someone will ask me a question about that when we get to question and answer period. I really appreciate your attention and thank you so much for being here tonight. It makes a difference when when the 98% of the community that has no clue what's going on, when you show up, it makes a difference. So thank you for being here tonight.
Who are facing criminal charges. Disproportionately, my clients are also people of color. And when I say that my clients are people of color disproportionately, I mean in three ways. They're disproportionately people of color in terms of their relationship to overall numbers in the population. They are disproportionately people of color in terms of what the crime statistics say, in terms of who commits crimes, who uses drugs, who possesses drugs. And my clients are disproportionately people of color in terms of the length, the harshness of their sentences, and their access to alternative means besides incarceration. The three kind of topic areas I've been asked to address tonight are kind of the racial, ethnic, and economic disparities present in the criminal justice system, sentencing policies and practices, and then finally access to drug and mental health treatment courts. In terms of racial and ethnic and economic disparities, the numbers are very clear. We know what they are nationally, but locally, in particular in Multnomah County, they are vast. For example, about 5% right now of the Multnomah County population are African Americans, but 24% of my clients in the Metro Public Defenders are Black people. And that's just at MPD, we're one of many different public defender agencies. Compare that to percentages of white people, who are about 72% of the population of Multnomah County, but make up only 66% of the population of our clients at MPD. In terms of prison populations, those numbers are there as well. Oregon's prison population at large for the entire state is about 1.7% are African American. But in Oregon's prisons, about 9.2% are. So the numbers bear out, and they don't bear out in terms of percentage of people that we know commit crimes or have drug or alcohol addiction. It's about the same as the population. So the numbers of people in prison and number of people who are my clients who are people of color are not there because they commit crimes at a higher level or have higher drug and alcohol addiction issues. They're there for obvious racial reasons. In terms of sentencing policies and practices, these were addressed up front a little bit, but mandatory minimum sentences, such as Measure 11 or Measure 57, Measure 57 being the one that I deal most with in the drug court, is mandatory minimum sentences for people who commit property crimes or some drug crimes. You can become Measure 57 eligible if you commit 2 prior misdemeanors. The third time, you are mandatory prison. And when I say mandatory, that means that the only person who can negotiate you out of prison is the district attorney's office. The judge cannot agree, no matter what your circumstances are, to remove you from prison and put you on probation. It's solely the discretion of the district attorney's office. And even if the district attorney's office agrees to give you what's called a downward departure, meaning that you're not going to prison today, that prison time still hangs above your head. And if you do not participate on probation the way that you are asked to participate on probation, then you will go to prison. And that's significant because some of the upswing we've seen in recent years in our prison beds has been to people who normally wouldn't have gone to prison but committed technical errors on their probation, and then after a probationary term are sentenced to prison because they violated the terms of probation. The last area I want to talk about is access to drug and mental health treatment courts. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm the defense attorney right now for the START Court program. START Court is a program that is oftentimes referred to as the diversion court for Measure 57. So my clients have been convicted largely of property crimes related to the fact that they are addicted to drugs or alcohol. And the point of the program is to divert them from prison into an intensive drug and alcohol treatment program. And even in those type of programs, which are not as well funded as they should be, in fact, we just had a 20% cut in our start court budget across the board, the numbers bear out differently. For example, in stop court, which is another drug treatment court, about 83% of our participants are white and 11% are black, which are smaller than the numbers of clients we represent. You'll remember 24% of our clientele are people of color, or black people specifically. And there's also a lot of discretion that plays into which of my clients are eligible for drug treatment courts. For example, in start court, we have an ongoing debate about level 8 DCSs. And one of the things that I think most people know about disparities in criminal justice is the difference between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. It's easier to get a level 8 DCS with crack cocaine than it is with powder cocaine. So who are the people we're excluding by not allowing level 8 DCSs to come into start court? Just anecdotally, I would say, as a public defender for the last 6 years, I would say that close to 75% of my clients have had either drug, alcohol addiction issues or mental health issues. But not a very large percentage of them are offered any sort of drug, alcohol treatment or mental health counseling that means anything unless they get into a specialty court. And the thing that I will end on in terms of access to drug and mental health treatment in courts is that I recently went to an event where there was an African-American provider of drug treatment, and they kept saying the conviction is worse than the addiction. So even if my clients successfully complete the drug and alcohol treatment program, they still have felony convictions. Thank you for your time.
My name is Emmanuel Price, founder of SCAFE. First of all, thank you, Reverend Kate, for having us, and I'm humbled and honored to be up here with such great people on this panel. And I'll just talk about a little bit about my experience. I created SCAFE, which is Second Chance for Everyone. It's a nonprofit organization about 5 years ago, out of my own frustrations, and I'll kind of give you a backstory about myself. So, I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, to a two-parent home, middle-class family, 17th and Fremont, which is Sabin, Bowman, and Grant. And I decided to go to HBCU, so that is a historically black college university. So I went to Virginia Union University to get the whole black culture experience and, to be around some people who looked like me, who spoke like me, and kind of get that whole experience. Majored in business management, came home every summer to see my family and friends. Going into my senior year, I came back to Portland and inadvertently got caught up with the wrong people. Committed a crime, ended up doing about 4.5 years of my life in prison. So I did not finish my senior year in Virginia. I actually finished it in the prison penitentiary correctional facility system. So going into that, it was just like a new world for me. I knew a lot of people, sadly, because I saw people from high school and middle school, and that's when I began to know that we were being locked up like crazy. A lot of people that I hadn't seen in a while, this is where they were. A lot of people that I played soccer with and football with, this is where they were. So going through that whole experience and then getting out and transitioning back into society, I found that there was, during the experience, there was not many resources in there. In fact, they don't do anything to help you to better yourself. There's no support services. It's a whole other world. It's basically like if we all go in and walk into a lion's den, none of us would have never been in a lion's den with lions. So we have to acclimate ourselves to learn how to survive, how to growl and roar. Even though we're not lions, we're going to do everything we can to fit in. And that's how I felt. So being in there and seeing everybody with different nationalities, different crimes, it was disheartening to see so many people that I've grown up with who were in there, who I knew when they got out probably would go back and reoffend because there's not a lot of services in there to help you transition into society successfully. So upon my release, I got out, went back to school, continued my education as much as I could, but it always came back down to that one question, like, have you been convicted of a felony? Or what did you do to land yourself in this position? And it didn't matter, you know, how many people gave me a great reference or how much education I completed or how many references I had. It still came down to that question of my background. So after going through several reentry services and different programs around Oregon, I found it was just really hard for me to get help. And it's not that I didn't want to work, and it's not that I was above flipping burgers or serving drinks, because I've done all that. I've bartended, I've served pizza, I've driven, I've done everything. But I knew that I wanted more for myself. And I knew that if somebody like myself, who grew up in a two-parent home, middle-class family, had you know, some great education, come from a very strong spiritual church upbringing, I knew if it was hard for me to get out and experience all these barriers, then only imagine how hard it would be for people who didn't have formal education, or for people who didn't have, you know, siblings or a two-parent home or a strong community to come back to. So that's why I created Scafe. And something that I was just writing down, listening to everybody, is that African Americans are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than their white counterparts. Now, even though I came from a great home and I knew better and all that, I still was a victim of those people who I thought were stupid and dumb, and then I became one of those stupid and dumb people. Not to say everybody that's incarcerated is ignorant and stupid, but sometimes, or my thinking was that I would never go down that road. That will never affect me because I was just on a whole other level, but I ended up being affected by it. So, fast forwarding into now, getting out, starting Scafe, learning how to align my beliefs with different businesses and local nonprofits to make sure that we can help provide different types of services for men and women who are getting out. So some of the things we do is that we go into the community and we talk to a lot of different businesses, a lot of different nonprofits, a lot of local grocery stores to see if they would be willing to, one, let a man or a woman volunteer, let them work, let them disclose their history. And I'm pretty much the liaison for these guys and girls, men and women, excuse me. And just to empower them and kind of give them the basic tools that we already have. Like, we know how to click and paste. We know how to sit here and listen and be attentive and put our hands in our lap and be very aware. But sometimes grown men don't know how to do that. And I find that if we can equip them with those tools, then we can reduce recidivism, we could build up stronger communities, we could enhance stronger families, and then kind of just get away from this cycle that has been plaguing our community and everybody for so long. Some of the changes that I would like to see, or that I think should happen in the near future inside of the prison walls, is just having more entrepreneurial ideas and opportunities for the men and women. Allowing them to be very competent with computer skills. Everything is ran by computer nowadays. Allowing them to have, or creating maybe, not only a different curriculum, but adding to a curriculum that they already have, because the curriculum and the things that they're learning inside, it doesn't hold no value out here. And I'm only saying this because I've been through it, and I know how it goes, unfortunately. What else? So in essence, I started Scafe. Just back to the basics. I started Scafe to help men and women transition to society, and all the support we have is from the community and local people, church people, faith-based organizations, and nonprofits, to make sure that we garner all these tools so we can give them to the men. So everything that we do, we give it to them for free, because I know that they have no money when they get out. So whatever we can do, whether it's resume writing services, providing suits and ties, being a person to help them speak etiquettely, and give them job readiness skills, is everything that Scafe does. And I'm extremely honored to be here again, and thank you guys for listening.
Well, I guess that's up to me now. At least to begin with the questions. Let me just first say that thank you all 4 of you for being here. It's really good. Thank you all for being here too. It's nice to see this many people interested in wanting to be part of this discussion. Part of my background is as a television reporter. I was a television reporter for Channel 8 for 17 years. And I also worked for public schools for 12 years. One of the most disturbing things I've seen over the years has been a change in journalism, a change in the way that the media deals with issues. I had an Oregonian reporter once tell me that his job was to show what the problems were, not what the solutions were. And I looked at him and I said, you're kidding, right? He said, no, that's my job. I said, no, that's not your job. Your job is to show what the situation is, to tell the story about what's really going on. That's the problems and the solutions. If there aren't any solutions, then sure, don't say anything. But if there are some possible solutions, then you should be talking about them. That's what I want to ask you folks about. That's what I'd like to start you off with. Now, you have already brought your things forward in terms of some of the solutions that you're working with. But I'd really like to have a sense of, not a long description, because I don't think we're going to have the time for that, but I'd really like to have a sense of what your solution might look like. What could we do next that would really have an impact? Give me just one, don't give me 20, because I know you have a list of 20. I've heard her list. I've heard JoAnn's list too, so. But I'd really like to have one thing that could be done that would have an impact.
Well, I mean, I think that the thing that stays on everyone's mind is particularly how Measure 11 is impacting people. It's incredibly disproportionate, the number of people of color who get charged and sent to prison for it. And I think for us at Partnership for Safety and Justice, what we're trying to do is really look at youth who get charged with Measure 11 and how they end up with the adult felony conviction that Emmanuel was talking about that is life-ruining. And I think addressing youth, and actually part of the new task force on public safety that's being created has a specific charge to look at those youth, and I think we need to create more momentum once again to make that happen, because we're ruining young people's lives. I mean, they need to be held accountable for committing crimes, and that's right. But it's not right to sort of universally saddle young people with a lifelong felony conviction that creates barriers to stable housing, education, jobs that are ultimately going to lead to their success.
Is she still good?
No. That's a good one. I was just, you said one. I was just trying to be thoughtful about the one. And since you said one, I think the most important thing that we can do is prepare to participate fully in the fairness hearing that Judge Michael Simon will set as it relates to the Department of Justice settlement agreement. Because the current agreement that the auditor and the IPR director and the police chief and others think that they're implementing has had no public input. The day that it came in front of the city council, there was draft 2 that was presented to the city council, and that's what they voted on. But the public had not seen it, did not have a chance to weigh in, and it's really important that we don't allow the city of Portland to pretend that there was like a public process. We, the public, must weigh in on what a settlement agreement looks like and what will work and what doesn't work. We are about to spend $26 million over the next 5 years, and the people that are already out of the gate spending the money are not the people that we want in charge of reforming Portland Place.
I was going to say, separate from fast restructuring where we take money and put it into housing and education and drug treatment so that we don't have people committing crimes, I think that we, as all of us can do, is educate ourselves about our sentencing laws that are currently on the books and about the lack of discretion. I can't tell you the number of times that we have jury trials and our clients are found guilty, and we're not allowed to talk to jurors unless jurors approach us. And afterwards, when they find out what the defendant, what my client got, they are devastated that they sent a young man or a young woman or a person to prison for so long. Or they're devastated to know about what they weren't allowed to know beforehand. So I would say educate yourselves about what ballot initiatives are being proposed and voted on, educate yourselves about sentencing laws, educate yourself about who is facing charges and how long their sentences are potentially going to be, and show up for jury duty and actually stay there. That doesn't fix the whole problem, but it's definitely helpful to have educated jurors who are willing to be that one lone person to say, I'm not convicting this person.
Just piggyback off what Cia said, just education. And I've been talking about this maybe a few months now, and it may sound a little strange, but I'll say it. Having some type of class or some type of curriculum in the schools for the young adults, for the young kids. And it almost sounds crazy, but if we teach them how to act in public, if we teach them how to hold on to the steering wheel when they know they've done nothing wrong, or give them know your rights training, and give them all the policies and procedures, and we help them not get killed, we help them not go to prison, we help keep these families together. So education from 5th grade on up, inside and outside of the prison and the school system.
Interesting. Well, we have time right now, about 15 minutes, not quite, about 13 minutes right now before we're supposed to break at 8 o'clock. So I would like, if possible, if you have questions, you can come to the mic here. That would be helpful because, as we were told earlier, KBOO is in fact doing the recording. So and they'll be running this at some point. So if they can't hear you if you were sitting out in the audience, so if you can come up to the mic, that would help.
Okay. I understand that this is for a quick centered question, and the broader discussion would be for the groups.
Right.
Okay. So I'll just simply say that as an old-fashioned Freudian psychiatrist who's interested in why people do things and go into the depths of it and don't just hand out drugs that enriches big pharma, and that may sound a little strange, I have some major concerns about why drug use is demonized, and I'll talk more about that later. You know, how does one abuse a chemical? You know, it has been demonized. The question and I'll talk about that in a smaller group. The question I have, well, one last thing. Billie Holiday had a career ruined because she used heroin. She wasn't dealing it to support her habit. She made plenty of money, but she had a cabaret car taken away and destroyed her. And all she did was she had some emotional need to use heroin to deaden her pain, okay? Her psychological pain. The question I have today, and I really am ignorant about this right now, to what extent and for which drugs are people being criminalized just because they use it? I'm not talking about a DUI, you know, where you're endangering somebody. I'm not talking about a meth house where kids are involved. That's horrible. I've treated firemen, paramedics, who describe how awful that is. I've treated people who grew up with that. But I'm talking about victimless, where the only victim, possibly, is oneself. To what extent, if you can put it as a percentage or what kind of drugs, are people being criminalized, sent to jail, and having a felony or whatever put on the record simply because they used something, either recreationally at one end or because they were habituated or they were hurting internally for whatever reason and they got caught doing it?
So I got a great story for you. So June 2 years ago, 300 people were arrested on Northeast Killingsworth by PCC Cascade, you know, Jefferson in that area, right? Okay. And so, of course, you know, you think, oh my gosh, 300 people were arrested, right? Well, the frame was Portland police were developing a project where they were going to target youth violence. And so their goal was to get weapons out of the hands of youth. Okay. 300 people were arrested within 30 days. 53% of the people that were arrested were over 40 years old. 58% of the people arrested were arrested for alcohol-related offenses. 0.1% had weapons. There were about 10 that were under the legal age, so under 18. I tell you this story because this story says that we made criminals of 300 people because there was a need, somebody had a need to get rid of the quote-unquote undesirables in a certain part of town, right? That's a great example. Some people were arrested for having marijuana, but out of the 300 people arrested, most of those were community drunks.
I thought possession of marijuana had been decriminalized 35 years ago in Oregon.
If you're a white man, that's true. If you're a young African American or Latino kid, that's absolutely not true.
Interesting.
Just a short follow-up to that. Possession of controlled substances of any substance minus alcohol is illegal, and most of them are felonies.
I couldn't hear that.
Possession of controlled substances are all illegal except for alcohol, and including marijuana at certain levels, and almost all of them are felonies.
To just be in possession of it?
Yes.
Even if there's no
Why
proof
don't
that
you talk about that in a larger group?
Okay.
And I want to encourage women too to come up here, because it's my experience that we are often mostly men. So be brave. Be brave.
Uh-oh, it's true.
How y'all doing? My name is Jerome Brooks. And so I have a question, or I guess a perspective to put on the table. When we talk about educating people on what their rights are, how the laws work, and things like that, that's one step. But I think, as JoAnn will attest to, a bigger part of the problem for the community is even when I know my rights, even when I know what the policies are, when I'm face to face with Portland police and I'm trying to assert my rights, or I'm trying to assert the knowledge that I know, where do we find the balance on what you know and preservation of life? I think that's a really big part of it, because the Portland police know that the community is intimidated by them. And so how do we change the culture of leadership within the Portland Police Department, the Bureau, at the city, with the city leaders, and also tie the community into that in a way that allows us to start rebuilding trust? Because I think that this issue, from a very broad perspective, any solution to it is going to have to be founded on a very strong foundation of trust between all parties involved. And so how do we start that process?
So I think you're absolutely right. I think one thing that anybody, no matter who they are, can do. I can tell you that right now. What you can do is, when you see a traffic stop and bear witness. Stay close enough so that you can observe what's going on, but don't get so close that you can be accused of interfering with what's taking place. I live on 162nd and Stark, close to that area, and the police love to pretend that we got gangs and drug dealers and a whole bunch of other stuff going on, and that's simply not true. But what we've done in that community is train community members to, when they see a traffic stop happen, it is wonderful. People bring their kids outside, they bring their cameras, they bring their iPads, their iPhones, they take pictures, and that's what's going to stop police from brutalizing people in the immediate sense. The ultimate thing that we need is a new police chief. We need a police chief that understands that the culture of Portland police is corrupt, and it has to be changed. When you have a police chief that constantly says, "Oh, we didn't do anything wrong, our officers are fine," yet community members continue to end up dead, continue to end up in crises, that's a problem. So I would hope that people would galvanize and say, we need a change agent. And we don't have that. We have a guy that speaks well, but unfortunately has no desire to change the culture of Portland Police. And I don't think a police officer that came up through the ranks of Portland Police Bureau can be a police chief and be the change agent we need. We need someone from outside. We need someone 2 years from retirement that doesn't care where the bodies are buried, that's willing to come in and really clean up this mess that we have.
Thank you.
The problems you're talking about are not just in Portland, and they're not just in Oregon. So would you tell us a little bit about what other groups there are in this city, in this state, and across the country that are dealing with the same problems that you've all talked about?
Well, there are other organizations, and I know in terms of public defense work, there are national organizations. Locally here, we have the Oregon Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. that works on a lot of sentencing issues for our clients. I'm also a member of the National Lawyers Guild, which is a national organization of lawyers who work on these types of issues. And then, as mentioned earlier, Michelle Alexander galvanized a lot of different communities, and particularly communities of color, around issues of fighting to take back their communities. But in terms of the lawyers piece, those are probably the most active, the National Lawyers Guild and the Criminal Defense Lawyers Associations.
SCAPE is not the only group that's looking at this particular concern in some way. You may have a particular approach to it, but this is something that I heard about these concerns when I was working with some legislators from other states 3 or 4 years ago. So.
I just became aware of the StopMassIncarceration.org, and I'm looking at that and doing some comparative differences between what they do and the work we do here, so I'll look to them for some help. Also, I've got a little bit of information from the Stop and Frisk campaign, or not campaign, but movement that they're doing in New York, and they've been doing the work before me, and it's, and I'm just looking to my leaders and gleaning after them and picking up where they left off and kind of just aligning my beliefs with other organizations who do the same or similar work. Because I'm a baby in this, I'm still growing and developing as I go. So I don't know everything, but I'm always looking for other groups and different legislative folks who know more that can help me along the way and help us along the way.
Shannon, you saw this on Louisiana, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, there are countless, I think most of us are small and underfunded nonprofit groups, but there are recognizable names. You know, the ACLU has done a lot of work both locally and nationally. There's a national sentencing project. There's a great kind of reentry-focused group down in California, All of Us or None, that is a national leader. There are lots of people doing it, and I think our work is to continue to do it more collectively and quite honestly get more strategic in our efforts so we can win.
Okay, question, JoAnn, when is that going to be in court? What the date and time?
November 18th is the next day that we go in front of Judge Michael Simon, probably at 9 a.m. We don't have the time confirmed yet, but it's normally first thing in the morning at the federal courthouse downtown.
Yes, and just very briefly, what is it going to be concerned with?
He's going to set a date for the fairness hearing, right? And the fairness hearing will be the opportunity for the public to weigh in on the settlement agreement. So the next time he directs us will be to set the process in place for the public to weigh in on the settlement agreement.
And the 18th would be Monday, I guess?
It is I don't know what day of the week that is. I
believe
yes.
Monday.
It's Monday.
Monday.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right, yes.
9 a.m. Thank you.
9 a.m., yes. Federal courthouse, thank you.
We're about to split into groups, but before we do that, because you mentioned Stop and Frisk, and JoAnn, you do a really good job of what that is. I know that many people here know what that is, but I'm sure there's people who don't. Would you please speak to it?
Yes, so Portland Police Bureau actually collects data annually. They release data on people who've been stopped. So in Portland, you probably wouldn't be surprised to know that if you're African American, you're twice as likely to be stopped and searched by, almost 3 times as likely to be stopped and searched by Portland Police. If you're Latino, you're 1.7 times more likely to be stopped and searched by Portland Police. If you're white, you're less likely to be stopped, you're less likely to be searched, but if by chance you're stopped and if by chance you're searched, you're more likely to have guns, drugs, and other paraphernalia. And so Portland's police own data tells us that, but yet we still spend a lot of time stopping and searching young African American and Latino males.
Is it quick?
Yeah.
Go.
So recently, there have been a small number of politicians who've been able to get successfully elected on this issue. Bill de Blasio just got elected tonight. Cory Booker has said that he's going to bring this forward. What are things that can be done to get more elected officials who will speak out about this, and then how do we make sure that people, once they are elected, really follow through with what they've said?
Well, actually, I would love to. So Charlie Hales, when fixing what was broken at the Portland Police Bureau. And if you've been paying attention, I have to tell you that he's been absent from the conversation about how do you fundamentally fix what's broken within Portland Police. I was at the City Council last Wednesday, 3.5-hour City Council meeting. The first hour in 45 minutes was the IPR director and the police chief speaking. And so if you remember the public who goes to your city council to make sure that your voice gets heard for the 2 minutes that they give you, and you have to sit for 3.5 hours before you get your 2 minutes, you're a little annoyed once you get your 2 minutes. And so sitting in the audience, listening to Chief Reese say, the current system works fine. We don't need to fix oversight of police. The investigations work fine. And it works fine because we don't convict police of anything, right? That's why it works so well for Reese. So, in answer to your question about how do you make them do it, I think we need to start holding civil disobedience classes throughout Portland metropolitan area, because talking nice to policymakers, going into their office, having meetings, waiting your chance at a 3.5-hour city council meeting for 2 minutes is not giving us the results that we need. And quite frankly, too many people are being harmed in our community while we wait for politicians to do what they've been elected to do. And so I think it's time for the people to take over City Hall and demand those changes happen.
Well, there are several things that I would say. One is, I think that we have made a significant mistake in understanding just how politics works. And I think we need to figure out how we do it well. The thing that I have seen, the folks that I have seen that have been effective, have managed to do that effectiveness in a way that brings those political leaders to task on a regular basis. I cannot speak for Charlie Hill. I'm not going to try to, or try to speak for what's going on in City Hall, because again, I'm not there. I can't really guarantee. But I can tell you that in terms of the legislature, what has happened has been that we've started to see people in the office, not in the offices, but in the committee rooms. When we started to see more than just the lobbyists and white faces in the committee rooms, I got some of my colleagues saying, well, who are these people? Why are they're not just here for 1 or 2 days presentation. They're actually there to talk about economic development and talk about land use and to talk about other issues. And in fact, they were only used to seeing people of color when they were talking about human services issues, or perhaps education, or health care. When folks started to show up at length on other areas, they started to make a difference. I think you saw that when we were done, when we had the presentation of the bills that you testified on and I testified on this last session. What I also saw was the Urban League of Portland has had a really strong presence daily in the legislature, not just on special things or special days. I think there's another aspect that I think is important. Every legislator that I know has a town hall of some form, once a month or every other month. If folks are showing up there, that makes a difference. And I'll put it another way. Right after the Aaron Campbell shooting, one of the things that happened in the legislature I was new to this. I mean, it was my first month of the February session in 2010. I was sitting in the lounge. There's a legislative lounge where you have just the legislators there, sitting around with a group of about 10 people. And at one point, we were all just sort of sitting there. One of the legislators from Eugene turns to me and says, "Lou, what are we going to do about these Portland police?" Now, for the 10 legislators to be sitting there and turn to me to talk about that particular issue was a change. I don't think they would have talked about it if I hadn't been there. And they certainly wouldn't have been asking what to do. What are we going to do? And I think that that's part of the effort. It's got to be a way of being in those rooms when those decisions are made. A friend of mine puts it that if you aren't at the table, you're the appetizer. Well, in many cases, the folks that, certainly people of color, have been the appetizer for a long time. And now it's not just the appetizer, it's completely dismissed. We can't allow that. We've had the history. I think it's an interesting book, and we'll talk later on what the new Jim Crow is all about. And we've had a good history lesson up here about where things are and what the statistics are. The question is, what are we going to do next, and how do we do it effectively? I came up through a time when I was marching every other weekend. Well, okay, marching can be good. It also can be it can be an old school kind of thing that sometimes works and sometimes does not. I think in terms of dealing with the legislature, and that's who I will speak to. I'm not going to try to speak to the city council or county or metro or whatever, or for that matter, Congress, because Congress is a whole other thing altogether. But at the legislature, I think it's a matter of making sure that your comments, your concerns are made. In Oregon, you can do that in a different way than you can in other states. And I would encourage you to find the most effective way to really deal with those legislators.
I just want to add quickly, we have primaries coming up in May and an election cycle in 2014, and getting involved in the elections and going to these town halls, asking questions about this issue and electing the right candidate that you then can hold their feet to the fire. I mean, I think barring some major change in our government system, the best way to get involved is to know who your elected officials are before you vote for them. Go to the town halls, figure it out. And then if you love them, donate and volunteer on their campaigns and make sure we get the right people down in Salem.
On a simple level, if they don't hear that this is a problem, they aren't going to be paying attention to it.
It's a great place now to transition. Thank you all. Great information. I'd like to ask our panelists to do now is if Emmanuel is over there and Cassie right here, JoAnn, if you will come here, and Shannon over there, I would like to ask you to go to a person with whom you'd like to speak more with. And if you see a big disparity, please go to one that needs more people. Thank you.
The people who are involved in the criminal justice system, if you work in the justice system, treat the folks who come in as quote offenders, treat them as human beings instead of labeling them as perpetrators, offenders, and felons, and all those other things that the words come off the tongue so easily. It's really important to hold police accountable. It's essential. I think every group probably agrees with that. And also, all the other criminal justice decision makers, prosecutors, judges, corrections officers, directors of prisons, and our legislators, because they make the laws and they can unmake them. We think that Measure 11 and Measure 57 should be unmade, and there should be no such thing as mandatory sentencing in Oregon.
Amen.
We think that the Oregon Innocence Project, piece of good news, is just starting up. Support it. Get behind it. We should be providing effective and accessible mental health and substance abuse treatment in our communities instead of using jails and prisons as treatment centers. We should learn more about why people don't succeed in positive programs like drug courts. You heard Cassia say people of color are less likely to succeed in drug court. I have also discovered by evaluating the Seattle Mental Health Court that people of color are less likely to succeed in mental health courts. And somebody needs to be taking a look at that instead of saying, oh, that evaluation stuff, that's a luxury. It's a necessity. We need to understand where we're going wrong so we can do better. And we need to help the families of people who have been caught up in the prison system by helping strengthen them, by helping them with transition services when their people come out of prison, we need to pay attention to that because we don't want multi-generational incarceration to continue to happen. That's
Let's give her some love. You're all being so polite. If you hear something that resonates with you, feel free to clap or something.
And I have an anti-resignation. It makes me cringe when we call it the criminal justice system.
Because it's not.
Like maybe we can, maybe we can call it the legal system, because technically it is.
Someone from one of the other groups, ready? Are we ready?
Yeah, we are ready.
Okay.
I guess we're ready. We talked a lot with JoAnn about different things the community might, or average members of the community could do about different parts of the criminal justice system that are not really just. And the time was rather short and we jumped around a little bit, but we talked a lot about education, especially educating people about the police media system, because the police do have a system for sending out press releases and they don't check background very well. Usually their first statements get a lot more attention than the corrected statements. They tend to sometimes overemphasize or imagine that someone is involved with the gang, and often they're not. But again, the corrections you don't hear about. The Alberta Ministerial Alliance is doing a lot of work on addressing what the police systems are in this community, and having a meeting on Thursday that's open to the public includes a lot of coalitions. 26, did you say?
That's correct. 26 organizations and hundreds of individuals are part of the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. Didn't want you to mix it up with the Alberta Ministerial Alliance, which is a faith-based alliance, but it's broader than that. You're welcome. And we also gave people dates about various meetings that are taking place. Would you like me to do that now? And so we told people about the AMA Coalition meeting on Thursday at Maranatha Church, which is located at 13th and Northeast Skidmore, from 5 to 6:30 p.m. We told people that the Portland campaign to end the new Jim Crow meets the first and third Saturday at PCC Cascade on the second floor of the Student Center. We told people that there will be a video of the Safe and Sound video showing a community dialogue on December 12th. It will be at the Rosewood Cafe, located on 162nd and Southeast Star, and that will be from 6 to 8 p.m. We had some wonderful suggestions from our participants in our group about how do we bring people together and prepare them for the fairness hearings that will be coming up. And I promised them on Thursday that is part of the conversation at the AMA Coalition General Meeting. Thank you. Did we do it?
Some love.
Okay, hope I do justice. We had a lot of participants with a lot of great ideas and not nearly enough time. This is a very frustrating format. So that, because it's such a deep and broad topic. So in terms of education, definitely people were noting that pre-incarceration, there's a component there. That once you're incarcerated, there's a lot of illiteracy. So then it would be hard to get educated and take advantage of anything. And then, of course, the education of citizens to actually just know what's going on. A lot of people just, we don't know. Policy changes, there's a great point made about we have like immediate action changes for what can we do instantly, as well as the 30,000-foot level changes of policy and government. Also a sort of mid-level of checking with businesses and corporations, either where we work or where we do business, and checking with their corporate hiring policies and going to HR and, you know, I guess some of the corporation has eliminated that box of if you have this felony in your history, in your background. Because getting a job is a huge factor in having new opportunities besides just going back in. And the point was made a lot that that really prison isn't about much except just churning out prisoners and churning out felons. So we have citizen awareness as humans are involved, and as citizens we need to be involved in government, and also that there's so much surprise about this issue. At least in Portland, maybe we could use a little more media coverage of reality for the legal system. And thank you, KBOO, for actually having programs that it rocks. Regarding recidivism, possibilities to address it, there's just nothing there when you get out. There is nothing to help the person. Not just go back in. And then it's a miracle when you don't just go back in. Healthcare, food literally is sickening people. You do not want medical attention inside. That doesn't mean you don't need it. It means you do not want what they're going to provide. I think that was about it. Come on.
We're guilty of having a great conversation and not doing much in the listening. But we really try to talk about constructive changes and just the frustration that everyone is talking about, that there's so much to do and we want magic bullets and magic people. But so we did it. There were a few things that I think that we said that were pretty important, and one of them is to get involved in electing officials that we know are on the right side of this, to support those people, be involved in the legislative process. We also had a conversation about how come there are 500 people here? And my cynical answer was because white people don't have to be here, because we don't have to care. And so we had kind of a conversation about that, and instead of, well, we had a conversation about that, and to me it puts the responsibility on each of us who are here to talk to other people who should be here, or that would benefit from being here, that the world would benefit if they were here. So more of that.
Put on me.
So that, anything else that was?
Sum up.
Well, it is good to see the people who are here. I think that the last comments are very important, especially who's responsible for change here. It's not, you know, there's a, I desegregated my high school when I was in Atlanta. And it was, anytime there was an issue regarding race that came up, everybody sort of turned to me to give the answer, which gets to be a little tiring at a certain point. But I have three things that I wanted to bring up to sort of regarding this whole thing, and they involve three different issues, three different things that I run into. You want me to open up the microphone over here? I'll do that. One is the first time I heard my father lie to me. A lot, not lie to me, but lie. I was about 5 years old, and I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, at an department store. And so I went over to get a drink of water, and the water fountain said whites and colored. And the colored water fountain was not working. So I drank from the white fountain because it was working. And one of the people in the store came over to my father and he said, "That boy can't drink at that fountain." And my father lied and said, "Well, he can't read." That was not true. I could read very well. I just wanted to walk. That was the first thing. Now that was the old Jim Crow. To give you a sense of things, that was the old Jim Crow. Some of the other examples of the present Jim Crow is something that I run into on a regular basis. And we really haven't spoken to it as much as I'd like to. I'd like to see us, but it's something that I bring up all the time. And that's the 4th grade black boys. In the 4th grade, the experience I've had is when a teacher is seeing a 4th grade black boy, he's about the same height as she is. And most of those teachers are white teachers. And he is no longer the cute little kid that he had been. He's now suddenly eye to eye. And I've seen the whole situation change, where you end up with that teacher being exceptionally disciplined because that child has done something. That child does something wrong, and immediately that child is wrong, has a problem, has a deficit. And that can be just simply saying no to the teacher. But it also ends up with that teacher, that child, suddenly going off on a path that ends up with incarceration, that ends up with a stigma immediately attached to them for not doing well. And that I've seen on a regular basis, and we still haven't really been able to address that, because that's long before they reach the prison system. It's long before they're suddenly identified as having a deficit immediately because they have black skin and they are suddenly walking, not strutting in a way that is somehow challenging or threatening to that teacher. That's something that I've seen, and I think we need to try to figure out how we speak to that. So I bring it up on a regular basis, and many teachers look at me and they go, I don't do that. And I go, look at how you discipline. Where are you, which kids are going in to be disciplined? Well, they're out of line. Well, why are they out of line? Because they're not acting the way that you want that particular child to act. And that's one of the issues that you run into. And then finally, I was lucky last week to go to a really important, very interesting, I won't say it's important, but it was a very interesting conference. I was at Stanford with a group of African-American colleges, historically black colleges and universities. 17 of them, one of them was Virginia, just so that you know. And they were there at Stanford to talk about high-tech entrepreneurs. But one of the most fascinating conversations that we had within them was an important one, and an important distinction for me at least. The Stanford folks talked about the fact that they have journals that the students carry that are their failure journals. When they fail, they write down how they failed and what they learned from that failure. Interesting concept. But for the historically black colleges and universities, most of those presidents and development directors and teachers and students said, we can't afford to be failing. If we fail, there's a stigma attached to us immediately. And that stigma ends up being forced throughout their system, all the way down to the youngest kids. Truly, when they try to, if they do end up with a problem, they end up in prison. Suddenly, they are failures forever. That's a stigma that's attached to them. Those are the kinds of issues that I'm trying to figure out how we address. We don't address them necessarily legislatively, except to say, how are you looking at discipline? And now we have studies going on, finally talking about discipline issues. Now we have studies looking at the kinds of profiling, racial profiling that takes place. Now we have something that Chip Shields managed to push through, which was excellent. It took him quite a while to look at the racial impact of issues. But those are the kinds of things that I see, and those are the kinds of concerns that I have. And when I look at this particular book and this particular movement, if you will, to look at New Jim Crow, what occurs to me is a need to not only recognize that underlying kind of structure that has been developed, but also where we want to go next. One of the things I wanted to mention is that there's a group that's pushing a drop-the-box approach. I don't know if you've heard that or not, but the idea is to no longer have that box that you can check to say, have you had a felony? Because that is in housing, it's in education, it's certainly in job things. But so they're trying to find a way to do that. Well, that's one of the potential solutions. But I think it's a matter of us all taking responsibility for that solution and letting our legislative leaders and other political leaders know about that. And the political leaders are not necessarily elected leaders. They are, in fact, some of the people who donate to those elected that's got to be something that people need to recognize, that the struggle is not just who's out there officially being elected, but it's also the people who are supporting them, and that can be a very important factor.
I want to close tonight. I want to thank you all for coming here. I want to let you know that there'll be another meeting of the new Jim Crow that's associated with this church on November 21st, 7 p.m. Secretary Martin, raise your hand so that you know if you want more information. I want to close though with a reading. This is our hymnal.
Before you close.
Nope. Sorry, Barry. We did something. This has our hymnal, but it also has readings in the back from all of the world faiths and people who inspire us. So I'm going to read something from Frederick Douglass. Who can say who Frederick Douglass is?
Yeah. Well, who can say who Andy Cruz is? He was killed in Santa Cruz police.
That's correct. Well, I think it was said that 19.
And what was he when he was, what was he born into? There you go. Okay, so this is from he. And I'm going to say it, then you know that I am totally committed to nonviolence. These are his words. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will.
That's why I'm struggling.
Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. The limit of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress.